Hello and welcome to my first of a series of Did You Know short videos for MAS Environmental. I'm Mike Stigwood. I've got 45 years experience dealing with statutory nuisances issues, and so I wanted to share a few points with you about that particular subject as my first Did You Know video. Firstly, local authorities have a duty to positively inspect their district for nuisances and not just react to any complaints you might make. So if there is some poor member of the public who is suffering a nuisance and it's pretty obvious and the local authorities should be aware of it, then they should be acting to deal with that regardless of whether there has been a complaint or not. Number two, when someone who resides in an area complains about one of the defined statutory nuisances, the local authority must investigate it. So that means that if you've made that complaint, they have a duty to investigate. An investigation is not just sending you some diary sheets to fill in. It goes beyond that. Their duty goes beyond just looking at your diary sheets. Number three, once a local authority is satisfied a statutory nuisance exists, then they are obliged in law to serve an abatement notice, except in some very rare circumstances. Arguably, if they have not served a notice, then they are not satisfied there is a nuisance, and in which case they shouldn't be writing to a party saying stop doing what you're doing or quieten it down or change what you're doing if they're not satisfied it's a nuisance, because it's at a tolerable or acceptable or reasonable level. Number four, a private individual, often termed an aggrieved person, can start their own proceedings for statutory nuisance provided they meet certain rules. Now, in England and Wales, it is progressed as a private prosecution with a criminal penalty possible at the outset, and it is not the same as the action taken by the local authority. For example, a different standard of proof applies at the outset. Number five, local authority officers do not have to witness a nuisance for action to start. The most important evidence is that of the affected residents. Officers might want to visit to witness and see whether they can corroborate the evidence and see the strength of the individual's evidence, but they do not have to witness it to determine whether, on the balance of probabilities, a nuisance exists. Number six, most abatement notices served by local authorities contain significant faults. That's a finding certainly of our research, and many are just completely invalid. Number seven, as a rule, you cannot challenge faults with a notice that's been served on you if you fail to challenge them by way of an appeal, unless they are so bad, i.e. the faults are so bad, the notice is invalid. And from my research, many are. Number eight, a statutory nuisance does not exist just because a local authority decides it does. Only a court can decide that. Local authorities merely express their view in a notice. In fact, they are giving you notice of their view. However, if you do not challenge their view, then a breach of their notice becomes an offence. The duty is to positively challenge the view of the local authority by appeal if you do not agree with what they've said in their notice. Interestingly, the survey by MAS Environmental found that most abatement notices wrongly set out the penalties, and the description of the nuisance itself was also inadequate in a number of respects. And this is an important element, because if you wrongly describe the nuisance, and a nuisance as described is then held to be an offence in the future in perpetuity, so at some considerable time in the future, then what was that nuisance that they were saying was an offence? It needs a very clear and precise description so there can be no ambiguity as to what is and is not covered by that notice. This is one of the, or probably the prime problem with most local authority notices that they have served. Number 10. Excessive noise caused by poor sound insulation in older houses or flats built before the building regulation controls over noise came in effectively are not protected, or that issue is not protected by the statutory nuisance regime and its laws. However, if you are a tenant, you are now able to argue the dwelling is unfit for habitation under a new law introduced in 2019. On that one, I can only say watch this space, but noise can render a dwelling unfit due to the way that it was inadequately constructed to resist the passage of noise, for example, from aircraft flying over or from road traffic noise. Neighbour noise, a much more difficult issue, because neighbour noise is generally due down to their unreasonable behaviour. But noise per se could render a property unfit because it has both physiological and psychological effects on people, and we certainly have evidence now from the World Health Organization that shows noise can lead to critical health effects in various ways and accelerate deaths. Thank you. This is the first of a short series of videos. I'm actually on location at the moment in my motorhome in Australia, stuck here following the lockdown and the prevention of flights. So I thought I'd try and spend my time a little bit usefully in producing some Did You Know videos. Any feedback, gratefully receive. Many thanks.